let me introduce myself. I'm Nóra Wünsch-Nagy, and I teach at ELTE. We call it ELTE University in Budapest. And I've been working with LCT for quite a while. And this study I'm presenting here is part of the big critical reflection book that you might be familiar with. And I'm really happy to be talking to you here because, as my husband sometimes says, like, he's the victim. I always talk to him about LCT, and he always says, like, do you want me to listen or to comment or just listen and nod? So finally, I have a group of people who really want to listen to what I need to say about LCT. So the title of this presentation, as you see, is Reflection for Reflection's Sake, or for Knowledge Building. And you see the Deep Purple album cover, which was carefully chosen for this presentation. But it's also something that I use a lot in my teaching, this picture, not for reflection, but I teach intertextuality with it because this is an image for teaching mythology, Narcissus, you see. So, and it's stuck in my mind somehow. So let me just share what I'm going to talk about. 5 steps. I will explain the context where I come from and where this whole issue of reflection comes from. Then I will talk a little bit about the challenge of reflective practice. I will introduce the coursework that I do and how I analyzed texts my students produce. And I found 3 pedagogical strategies that I have been using. I was actually using long before this study, and since then I have even used these strategies even more. And some lessons learned. Both for classroom research and for like analytical research agenda that I found that are important. So sometimes I will stop and ask you, if you don't mind, because that's the point here, if you have experienced anything similar, if you see any kind of issues coming up as I speak. So as I said, I teach at ELTE University. This is the largest university in Hungary. We have about 400 students joining the English Studies program each year. And we work in both lecture and seminar formats. We have weekly seminars with 12 to 16 people in a group. So we have really small group sizes. And I work at the DL, which is the Department of English Applied Linguistics. So we teach translation studies and all sorts of other things. But we also teach courses in the language pedagogy program. So we run courses for teacher trainees that they are in a different program, not in the BA, MA structure, but here to be a teacher, you need to study for 6 years. And all the students I teach have English as their first subject and then another subject, which is really interesting because you might end up with mathematicians and also music teachers, plus Spanish or Hungarian or French or Russian or whatever, German language teachers, plus English in the same group. So it's a really diverse group, but they all have this common subject of English. We do these courses called content-based language development, which is more like a module name that we design for them each semester. And within this module, I designed this course called Making Meaning with Visual Narratives. I've been doing this for about, I don't know, 8 years now. So a lot of data and experience came out of that. The main point of my course is teaching multimodal literacy development, not critical reflection per se, as you imagine. So I do this by teaching multimodal analysis and how they could integrate it into teaching. And critical reflection is just somehow runs along this. So it's everywhere, as you will see. Okay. So the challenge here, as I said, with critical reflection is that as I've been reading the final examination instructions and guidelines for students, I see it as I talk to students, I see, and when you read, of course, the literature, you see that reflection means so many things that it's really hard to understand what it actually means to different people. And my students keep telling me like how they need to reflect, like a reflective essay or hand in a reflective assignment after each lesson they teach, because in the 5th and 6th year, they start teaching. So they have a short teaching practice and then a long teaching practice. And every time they teach a lesson or they write an assignment, it needs to contain a reflective part. But they don't know what it actually means. And having talked to teachers from secondary up, I do see that it's more like a kind of really, they are trapped in themselves kind of reflection, what they do sometimes, like how they felt, what they experienced, and so on. But it's part of their pedagogical and training practice. So it's somehow an everyday routine according to the guidelines that are expected from them. And it needs to be demonstrated really clearly that they can reflect. It's kind of thought to be a kind of cyclical and active and dynamic process. And they are expected to do something like describe what happened, analyze it, and evaluate it. But they are not really saying what kind of genre it is or what the whole text should look like, but these are just like functions that they need to kind of fulfill. And then there's the pedagogical task when they actually need to hand in a critical reflection at the end of the course. It's also in dialogues that they do in circles in the language pedagogy department, and they can do it either individually and or sometimes in groups. And as you see, it's also a kind of cognitive process. It's a reflection on and in action kind of idea where they have to integrate theory and practice, which is kind of part of everything. So it's everywhere, as you see. And the challenge here is that it's in every written assignment that they do. So I've collected, talking to them and having read all the guidelines, I collected all the assignments where you have reflection. And it's like they need to hand in a portfolio, sometimes at the end of courses and at the end of their studies. And reflection is part of the larger text as a standalone piece. And then reflection is part of lesson plans. And it's part of reports they write after lessons. And then they need to write something like a career path essay where they envision what's going to happen to them. And it comes up again and again when they become teachers. And of course, within courses, there are so many things they write that contains reflection. It's like critical reflection essays, learning journals, reflective journals, critical reflection reports, case studies, text analysis, and paragraphs. So it's a lot. And you don't know what's really happening when you do this. And of course, every teacher have different expectations. So it's really hard to fulfill everyone's desires, as we know. So this is the basic challenge that I faced when I talk to my students. But it's not only with the teacher trainees. I don't know what you experience, but it's in every course that I see is that the reflective part is kind of part of your university education, that it needs to be present everywhere, that you can really connect what you study with what you experience. So here is Narcissus Caravaggio's, and this is how I see my students. They are like staring into the pond, looking at themselves, and they don't really know what they are reflecting on anymore after a while. They are a bit lost in this experience. And what I have seen is that reflection assignments are often vague. They are everywhere. They often lack explicit guidance, demand little genre awareness, which is one of the biggest issues I see in different departments in the universities that I work. Different people might mean different things by different genres. Not even within the same department, people agree on what an argument should be like, or what types of arguments there are, or what a review is like, or they don't even name it sometimes. And the worst is when teachers simply ask the students to hand in an assignment or an essay, and they are never told what they should be handing in. And that's really weird and confusing for the students. And it goes hand in hand with the lack of a model for integrating theory and practice for them, just like the starting point. And I also experienced that without shared experiences, it's really hard to do collaborative kind of reflection in the classroom. Because if everybody brings their own teaching experiences in their short teaching practice, that's really interesting on the anecdotal level. But like, how can you work with that from a kind of objective critical perspective? That's my big problem here. So this is what I keep thinking about this album cover. It's like he's looking at himself, and he seems to be like all clear, and everything gets blurry around. So this is how I see it. Like everything is mixed up sometimes, and people need guidance when they do this kind of reflective thinking. So the course that I designed is this. It's a 13-week course. Yesterday, I found out that in other countries, you have much longer semesters, like in Sweden, probably 20 to 24 weeks even. It's amazing. So we have
Is
a
that
30,
true? Do you go that long?
someone
Well,
who's
we
from
only have
Sweden,
2 terms, so
but we do too.
We do
yeah.
too.
Well, right, okay. Yeah, well, it's a long time. We got 30 week. Used to be, yeah, something like, yeah. We changed the points credit system, so it used to be easier. 1 week, and then you'd have 1 credit. Now it's 1.5, and I can't do the maths, but yeah, it's longer than that anyway.
Wow.
Okay. So yeah, that's fine. Nordic people are really smart, probably. I don't know. Let's say some cliches, but it's really wrong. So we have 14-week semesters, 13-week courses. I focus on multimodal literacy development. Reflection is not the main objective here, but it's integrated into every task that I do in this course. And like the core of the course, at the core of the course, you find 2 exhibition visits. I always say this, that it came as a surprise. In the very first course that I taught, it was a kind of a reward at the end of the course for the students, the exhibition visit, and it turned out so well that then I worked really closely with a small youth gallery near the uni. So I always take them there, and we are really lucky that we have a literary museum just around the corner. Actually, there are museums everywhere here. But I take them to the really small free one, just to show them that when they are teachers, they can also go wherever they can go and explore any gallery. So we go there actually not really knowing what we are going to look at. I always know, but they don't always know the details. And the Literary Museum, the Petőfi Museum, is PIM for short, is where the exhibition happened, what I will talk about here. So stage 1 is like the first 4 sessions are about, we work with in-class description of multimodal text, we analyze them, and we learn a bit of theory. And students need to do quite a lot of viewing and research exercises. And then we prepare for the museum visits by learning about the language and semiotics of and multimodality in the museums. And we go there, then we talk, and then they write reviews, and we go again, and we talk again. And then the last part of the project, they design something on their own, which is for teacher trainees is a lesson plan usually, or a unit that they will teach using the ideas that we worked with, and they also write a kind of reflective piece with it, or it happens in dialogues. For non-teachers, they can also choose different projects and presentations, something analytical and multimodal. So what do I do to support and analyze the students' critical reflection? I work with genre pedagogy, and I use the big genre map. I use a variety of writing tasks. Whatever is in green, I will talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. I work with semantics more and more consciously. I think I had to become really confident. I don't know how you feel about it, but at first I thought it was all clear and easy to understand, and the students will get it immediately. They get it once you visualize it clearly, and you don't, as Carl always says, don't put too much theory on them if it comes from like bottom up. We learn a lot about multimodality, as I said, viewing, reading, and analyzing the text, discussing them. They do the research, image research, and then analysis. And we work with quite a lot of texts. We go to the museum, and then we do quite a lot of dialogue, either in the museum or in the classroom. It's all very clear, and it's easy. So what happens is that with the writing tasks, I do make them write quite a lot. Sometimes in class, as you see, they have to write about 300 words. And what I experience is that I like to get to know them a little. So they write short recounts of childhood reading experiences, for example, if it's more reading focused, or memorable museum experiences. The point here is that they cannot get really bad grades for these, because if you write about a personal experience, I say to them, then I can't really say that it's rubbish. They work with they write image descriptions, captions for images, and short illustration briefs, pretending to be editors of books, because I think it's really nice to have this kind of reverse thinking to understand how like course books are designed for them. I used to work for like over 10 years in ELT book publishing as well, so I see that kind of background knowledge. I have that knowledge, and I can help them with that. And they do text descriptions, they write the exhibition review, and they do the final presentation, which is quite a complex genre, but it's the big final task. At first, I didn't know what I was doing here, actually, but then I started to realize that it's getting more and more complex, and I will talk about that in a moment. So the exhibition review writing task looks like this. With this particular exhibition, I was really lucky because it was about a Hungarian author who was also a psychologist and doctor, and called Chad Géza, who was in the big literary circles of the 19th century. It's really interesting to know this. And he wrote really interesting crime and psychological stories, short stories, but he also worked as a psychiatrist at the same time. So the exhibition was really interesting because he is quite a controversial figure: suicide, murder attempts, drug abuse. You can imagine everything around him that there is. So a lot of students were shocked, and they know that he's not part of the literary canon. He's not really taught in secondary schools, even if they are learning to be literature teachers. He's something that they cannot or don't teach. So it was quite good to take them to such an exhibition because it gives a lot of content for reflection, actually, and arguments even. You will see some images from the exhibition. What was really interesting in the second image, there are these drawers, and if you push them, they were like really 18 plus content with poetry and images and drug abuse and stuff like that. So it was quite an interesting exhibition. Things hidden in corners and lots of text everywhere. So what we do, we prepare for the exhibition, we talk a little about him, we go and see the exhibition, and then the students are informed. I tell them that they will need to write a review. Do you know what a review is? Yes, they do. What are the typical features of a review? They don't know. So I give them a sample review. We analyze that. We learn about the review stages, context, description, evaluation. Then they go on the various websites, the Rolling Stone or wherever they want to go. They find their own reviews. They analyze them for me. So it's great. Then we go to the exhibition. We look at it together. We walk around. We understand how objects work and how the text works. And then we talk. I usually start the discussion right after the lesson on some kind of platform. It's Moodle now, but whatever platform it is. And then they do the review. I usually tell them give them detailed instructions, like here you have to take the role of a language teacher writing for fellow teachers, and it shouldn't be more than a page long or A4 page long. And I really like you to, I always tell them that I'd like you to integrate some of the views and knowledge that you learned in the course when you have the evaluative part. So it shouldn't be about you because you are writing to other teachers. And here comes LCT, because at some point in the review writing preparation, I dedicate one lesson to semantics, because I didn't start it right away, but after a while I started noticing how much their reviews are more like diary entries about what they liked, what they didn't like, how they felt, and so on. So, but then I asked them, like, where do you scroll when you want to see the reviewer's opinion? It's not everywhere. You need to have a descriptive part. You need to have some kind of voice coming from you, and they need to get that. But if I just tell them, it's not that clear. But when I show them a semantic wave, how you shift between different types of knowledge, then it's getting clearer. So, but just showing them a video, which there's really good content, or just talking about it doesn't work. So they need to do the analysis themselves, even if it's really basic, but they need to do some kind of analysis, which I now realize is really good for peer feedback and self-assessment as well. So I do that. So this is how it goes. So, sorry, I go back. They hand in the essays. I collected 9 essays, which were really good in this term, about the chat exhibition. And then they prepare for the final presentation. I will talk a little bit about the reviews now, because that's what I analyzed. Sorry, wrong direction. So the first one is like those genre stages. I really want to understand how the students write a review, if the stages are present at least, of typical genre stages. And like out of 9, after the really explicit instruction, here 7 followed the typical genre structure. One student wrote the classic personal response with descriptions like, oh, we went to the exhibition and it was really nice. It was a sunny day and there were a lot of people and I felt really good and I felt shocked. And it's all about the how I felt, putting them in the foregrounding their own experiences with no evaluation really. And one student here was a rebel. You always have those people, which is really great, because then they decided to write more like a guide for teachers. I don't know why, completely not misunderstood the task, but wanted to do something special. All right. In the past, before I did this really explicit instruction with the genre analysis, the review analysis, and the LCT semantics, it was the other way around. There were like 2 people who got it right, and 7 people would write about their own feelings, which is really good for your diary. And I settle them in a pub, but not like in an academic class. So it's all good. And then in class, I give them feedback using semantic ways, but for the study or to understand what really happens, I analyze their texts. And for that, you all know that. I'm preaching to the converted, I know, but you need a translation device. I do realize that it's not clear for everyone. And I read quite a lot of BA and MA thesis. I don't know how it is for you, where they don't really use translation devices at all, of any sort. So this is what I created. I used a 5-scale one here. Sometimes it's a 3-scale one, but here I used Holland and Steers and Carr's studies. I think that's the power of translation devices, is that you have lots of good examples that you can work with. So there was the coded content going from going on different levels of semantic gravity. What I expected here is that there are some signs of expressions and terminology, or even references to authors or scholars, where students can really show that they understood what we studied in the first part of the course, and they were able to show it in the reviews. Like something like the social reality of Hungarian writers. There is a nonlinear path, which is like a term from museum studies. It contains visual images, he says, with witty elements. So that's more like reflecting on what's describing from a critical perspective. And then there is that kind of comment, like as I read these sentences, I felt pain and sadness. I think that's really valuable to have this kind of content, but that shouldn't be too overwhelming, I think. It's great that you feel this way, but why does the exhibition make you feel this way? Tell me, explain to me, what can you see that makes you feel that? Or what can you see that might make your students feel that? So you need to be empowered to explain it to them, how this exhibition have this impact on you. And this is the point when sometimes I get shouted at by students. I don't know if you had this experience. And they tell me like, oh, why do I need to read all this theory? You always talk about theory to us. And we just want to teach. One girl was literally shouting this at me. And we never do any practice. And then I say to them, and I always win, I say to them, you can decide. You can make French fries in a fast food restaurant, and you just learn those steps, or you can be a big chef. But the big chef will always understand how the food is prepared and why it tastes like that. And then they always accepted that if they want to be like the big chef of the classroom, they need to understand the foundations and why certain things happen and how. And then it's great, and then we can move on. So, and they learn the
Nóra,
waves. Yes?
sorry, it's Lee here. I'd just like to ask you something about that translation device.
Yes.
When you're coding the students, are you kind of zooming out a little bit? In other words, just giving a code for their entire reflection? Because when I'm reading that, it just looks like there's some shifts going within each category. So, for example, I don't know, SG plus, where they describe text and space and objects and experience with examples. That, you
Yes.
know, I can see why that's SG plus, but then sharing suggestions about pedagogical practice, that I don't know if that's a little bit weaker, or you know, describing the text SG minus, describing the text and experience
Mm-hmm.
is maybe a little bit more concrete dependent, and then
Sharing
referencing.
suggestions.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, are you giving one code per response? In other words,
I
generally it's like this, but not looking at shifts within.
I will show that to you in a moment. Let me
Oh,
just show
okay.
you. Wait, here. So it's more like this for this one essay or this one reflection. You see, I go on the sentence level. Sometimes, yes, it's sentence level.
Okay.
Sometimes I did in the past even clauses or even word level. But then when I give that to the students, that was a bit too much for them to deal with so many shifts and changes in the gravity. What
Okay.
you see, I don't know if it answers your question. It's like,
No, it does. Thank you.
it's the sentence, but sometimes I think you make a really good point. It makes more sense to zoom even more in and go deeper into the clause or word level of like finding keywords. I did recode and recode this several times to see. I even left, I don't know if you do this, and I'm really interested in how you do it, but it's like the shifting back and forth, you know, just reading them first, not jumping right into the gravity analysis or whatever semantic or specialization if you do analysis. And then once I start coding it, then I leave it, and sometimes I go back in a week to see if I still code it the same way. And then I show it to someone. And if I see changes in my own understanding, then it's a bad thing. So I need to go back and back again and again. I wonder if you do that, or just you code it and it's what it is.
Always back and forth. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
you're welcome. So then see, silly typo, I'm
So
sorry.
really, Nóra, you're saying that the decision to use the sentence level is simply one a pedagogy one for the student.
For this one,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. That's. I just want to make sure that's because
Yeah.
we're not. I mean, sometimes people come in, particularly from a linguistics background, and think there's a linguistic unit that has to be analysed for linguistic purpose, for linguistic reasons, and there literally isn't, because codes are no respecter of grammar. They can just change, wherever they want to, and we can just change them. But if there's a pedagogic reason, that makes a lot of sense, because you don't want, if it helps the students to get a better sense of where they're going up and down. Because one of the things that I've talked to Anna Vera a lot about, and I think probably Lee as well, is how when we're doing this sort of pedagogic work, it's not really that important about getting an exact LCT analysis from these students. It's more about being able to get an analysis that they can then improve on what they've done, or they now have more mindful understanding of what is they're doing. So, because sometimes I think, it'd be easy to fetishize the research aspect of it in the sense of like, oh, well, I would analyze that differently, because I'd analyze that differently. But in terms of what it enables the students to do with going, all right, I'm here now, I want to change it to this. I think that's really helpful. I think that's one thing, by the way, if you write it, you should really emphasize that, because it's not about the teaching students to become good
Analyst.
LCT scholars and analysts. It's about giving LCT to them as a tool and then trying to figure out the best way that they can use it to help them,
And to reason, yes, and to reason and to, as I say now, I said before, so I think, and I know that from a linguistic point of view, people will sometimes go like, why? No one, they don't, my colleague doesn't understand why this happens, who's an assessment person. But I say that even sometimes I can highlight one word and say that that's higher or lower, and then jump from there to the sentence level to say that in the next sentence you do this, to show students how even just using one word can really shift the gravity. And it might even look odd in a sentence. The reason for using this with the students is, as Carl said, pointed that really well, is to show them that in their very first essays in the past, and it made sense then when I compared two, like the first essay, feedback, and then the second essay, that from flatlining, you should do some kind of shifts. The danger here, as I want to point out later on as well, is that they shouldn't think that the genre stages somehow go hand in hand with some sort of semantic gravity, higher or lower or whatever. SG plus should be description or not. That would be really wrong. But it happened, and the students asked, like, oh, then the description should be somewhere in the middle. I said, no, you can't do that. You shouldn't assign these. It's like task complexity shouldn't be assigned to genres either. And then shifts in semantic gravity shouldn't be assigned to genre stages. It's really dangerous to do the two analyses sometimes together, I think, with the students. But if you explain to them, then it works. It's not easy. It's not easy to get it right for them, but to use it as a kind of feedback tool, instead of just saying that, oh, this is too vague here, or it's too reads more like a diary here. If you draw the wave, once they understand it, then they show with their own hands, they start waving in the classroom. You might have noticed that they show like, oh, I should go up or down. So it's the coding, it can get really tricky, but here it's more like to keep it simple for them. So yeah. And then I was doing, as I was saying, I didn't know what I was doing with the writing tasks, but after this, I started noticing that I go up in complexity. And this is my own experience in task design and course design. So I was looking at, like, in terms of context dependency, what's the relative semantic strength of each task? And my question was like, how do the tasks relate to your own experiences and specialized knowledge? So the first, like the recount, it was more like really context dependent because it was about them. And they didn't show, like one or two students shows signs of connecting it to some kind of knowledge, like specialized knowledge. And then moving up with the speaking tasks, when we do more descriptive things, and we are moving back up with the review, I'm moving away, I think, even higher, and then we do more discussions and reflections in which we really talk about with the controversy and with like how to approach a controversial figure. We are moving up, and I think that by the end, I want them to be full on aware of how multimodality works and how they can make it happen. I'm not sure it's really right to say that the presentation task is the highest, but I am moving up the wave. And that's somehow helping them in this pathway to move away from their personal experiences and show them how they can connect it with theoretical knowledge. So the three strategies, and I'm
So, Nóra, can I please ask a question?
Yes.
Shall
I move back here?
Yeah. So is it the task itself, or is it that you're building knowledge so by the time they do the sixth task, they
Yes.
have more range?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
There's more. Yeah. Because the way we do this, by asking the right questions from them and guiding them, here the guidance is important, because like even in a speaking task, it's the same speaking. We are talking about an image, and we could be talking about an image in a really kind of reflective, analytical, theoretical way. But by like the second third of the class or the course, I can say things to them like, oh, you are flatlining here. Oh, you are not really making connections here. What theory can you see working here? So when I ask those questions, I think the complexity, and it's really strange, and the context dependency is more in the scaffolding and the guidance that I give to them and the way it happens. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
So we are shifting in the way we approach these dialogues. And there was this one lesson when I clearly see like how they were really confused after the exhibition. And they really needed a full lesson just to talk. And that's speaking task 3. When we said like, let's talk, sit down and talk. And there you model thinking through dialogue. First you speak and you reflect on your own challenges. The same happened when I took them to Freud and Bacon and the School of London painting exhibition, and they were saying like, why are you doing this to me? And I don't want to look at these Freud paintings. And then I said, well, we will go back to the classroom and we talk about it, why it disturbed you so much. But if I don't do that guidance, then they get stuck in the kind of, I feel disturbed by this exhibition level. But if you move back in and I model the thinking, okay, so those Freud paintings are quite disturbing and there were a lot of images. So why does it happen to us? And then I model this kind of thinking and they do the same, they copy. They are like little kindergarten children, really. And then they can argue and reason, but you need that kind of scaffolded dialogue, I think. That's how you can move up the wave. I hope I make sense and I'm not saying really silly things. So the 3 things I notice here is the genre pathway. I sequence the tasks. The shifting the writing rules, it's in the instruction and how much they understand their target audience and what the genre requires. And I am, as we said, we are progressing towards integrating specialized knowledge in the tasks. And here what I find is that I shouldn't assign task complexity to genre. So a recount could be probably complex, but it's also the presentation, or just a simpler discussion can be really complex. It depends on where you direct them. Semantic waves. After this course, I noticed that, and I'm convincing other colleagues to do this, and they find it really useful. So with the semantic waves, they do in-class text analysis, even with argument essays or reviews or whatever they write. And we use them for self-assessment now and also for peer feedback. And that's really interesting, I think, that the students have this mini tool they can use. They also learn to use lexical complexity analyzers and things like that, which is easy with probably LexTutor, they do that. But I think that was the big win of this research, is that I was not afraid anymore to give it to the students as a tool.
Sorry,
some of
Nóra, can I just jump about in? So, David, do you want to just ask a question? I didn't notice the chat. Please just jump in.
Yeah, sure, Carl. So I'm coming to you from having read a lot, but not listened very much. And one of the things I read is that Carl gives equal weight to semantic gravity and semantic density.
Yes.
And semantic density in particular is what allows people to bring in things like grammatical metaphor. And I don't understand how you can talk about semantic density without grammatical metaphor and without some kind of linguistic unit of analysis.
That's easy.
I don't. Okay, shoot.
That's easy because language is only one manifestation of semantic density. So you don't have to have a linguistic. I mean, if you're analyzing language, you might want to be clear. But I mean, you could analyze. You can analyze any unit, like with semantic density or semantic gravity. By the way, just a side note, you can use semantic gravity on its own and semantic density on its own. So we're not talking about your research, nor missing something out. But this is great because this is the sort of space in which these sorts of questions can come out from anywhere. But yeah, semantic density, I'll answer that because it's a bit more of a kind of general LCT question. So we can. You're saying so. You think that that might need a particular linguistic unit because it involves things in language. It can involve, as one way of changing semantic density, things like grammatical metaphor,
or type token ratio, or just lexical density. That is to say, the proportion of lexemes to total words. And it just seems to me that semantic density depends as much on the linguistic unit of analysis as it does on time. Because, of course, as soon as you use any kind of semantic wave, one of your axes has to be time.
Yeah.
And the other axis, which is weird, because, of course, in a written text, you're not really talking about time at all. You're talking about linguistic units, linguistic units, which is why Nóra gives us actually sentences as the linguistic unit. Carl says, oh, no, that's a pedagogical unit. It's not a linguistic unit, but nevertheless,
it's not a necessary unit of analysis. Yeah, but I mean, like the fact is that SFL shows there's a nightmarish number of linguistic features or attributes that contribute to the shaping of semantic density through the means of language. Remembering that the language is only one aspect of it. And the linguistic attributes that are brought together are just a nightmarish number. So what was it? Jim Martin kind of gather all of them up in mass, the sort of umbrella term mass, which involved God knows how many different aspects of, I think somebody else here would probably do a much better job of telling. I can't even remember, but there was stuff that was all across 3 meta functions and all over the shop. There were so many things implicated in shifting, in changing the complexity of meanings that he ended up with this umbrella term and all these things underneath it. And those things don't all click into gear at the same linguistic unit. So, you have to kind of analyze the unit. You never break up a data into a unit and then analyze the units, ever. Never do that in LCT. Now, if you want to do that in SFL, that's fine, or linguistics, but an LCT analysis would never say there is a predetermined way of chunking something up and then applying strengths to that, because that is such an arbitrary limit on what you're looking at. Because, like if I was looking at Classroom, for example, all sorts of things could be coming in that aren't anything to do with the specific linguistic unit that we were using. And also the bits of language you're using, they're all operating at different levels, like periodicity. I'm now stretching my remembrance of any kind of linguistics, but my memory of periodicity is that it's quite a big series of units, and it's not down to a sort of, small. So I suppose my answer here is that you would have to, if you did it that way, you'd have to chop it up and do a million different things, by which time you're doing an SFL or linguistics analysis anyway.
What I get out of that is what Carl says about it being easy is not so easy.
What about linguistic stuff? The linguistic stuff is not easy at all. But
no, I mean, the answer to my question, you began your answer by saying that it was an easy one to answer. But
no, it's not easy at all. No.
Okay.
There was a certain irony in what I was saying. Yeah, okay. The irony doesn't come across. But yeah, it's not at all an easy thing. But yeah, the reason why I sort of we have to watch out for that sort of things, because people are often looking, you're not saying this, yours is much more of a linguistic point that you're making. But often, for example, when I was in China, one of the things that people always asked at the end of every talk was what is the unit of analysis? And they always wanted to divide up whatever it is they were analyzing into units that they then applied the concept to, rather than realizing that, you know, practices just don't work like that. So that when you shift semantic gravity, if we stay in that one, for example, it could be anywhere, like at any point. It doesn't sit neatly into any kind of unit of measurement. So it depends on what kind of question you're trying to answer, whether you look at the entire, let's call it text, but the entire data set in one go as a really macro level, or where you go down into a meso or really micro, get really microscopic. It depends upon the problem situation, really. But yeah, I'm just kind of, but your question is much more of a sort of like semantic density involves these linguistic attributes, therefore we would need to get at those linguistic units, I think. When I'm thinking, my response would be, there are too many linguistic attributes. It would depend upon which attribute you were looking at, which point you're doing a linguistic analysis.
And so semantic is not a part of linguistics here. It's something else. But what is it?
Nothing in LCT is linguistics. Nothing whatsoever. Google has been calling me a professor of linguistics for about a year now, and will not change it on Google search. If anybody looks my name up.
So why not use the term semiotic instead of semantic?
Oh, it's too late now.
Yeah, okay.
There's the easy answer. It's too late now to do a product recall on that one. Okay. Also, because no approach has a monopoly on any word. So semantics might sound like it's linguistics, but you know, to a sociologist it doesn't. And like field sounds like it's linguistics to a linguist, and not to me it doesn't. That's a solid sociology term, but then to a physicist it's not either. So it's kind of, we don't have a monopoly on any word like that. We're all struggling over the bloody English language to try and, you know, say, but here we have to kind of say, this is the LCT version of it. And the LCT version of it is the semantics is about SG and SD, and, you know, that's it.
Are the same with gaze. Gaze, I always need to, it's not the Lacanian gaze, it's not the visual culture gaze, it's not psychoanalytical, it's LCT gaze.
Yeah, the worst one for gaze actually is the everyday academic meaning, where people just say gaze in a kind of vague way and think they know what they're talking about. And then they say something like, oh, well, I train my students, so it must be a trained gaze. And you think that is not the definition of a trained gaze, that you think you're training somebody is not the definition of a trained gaze. It's strength of subjective relations and interaction relations. But this is the sort of thing we struggle with. I was reading Borges' lectures recently, where he's saying exactly the same thing here as there, which is we work with language as our means, and unless we're going to put, you know, like Greek letters on it and stuff like that, like they do in mathematics, we are prone to this sort of, he calls it spontaneous sociology, where people just reduce conceptual terms to everyday terms. And we also got this disciplinary thing where, you know, one of the things about LCT and linguists is that they look beyond their own disciplinary boundaries. And there's not that many sociologists in LCT anyway. But so there's a lot of linguistic inclined people. But we still have to kind of say, no, it means that here, you know, it means that here rather than linguistics. Somebody else in sociology, to be honest, to answer your question, David, in sociology, it would be a nightmare to call it semiotics. Even more of a nightmare in sociology.
I think it's one thing to say that the unit depends on the research function, and that's something I completely agree with. Just to give an example, I'm also a painter, and paintings do have a natural unit of analysis. We put a frame around it, and if you put a frame around it, it's a unit. So it's one thing to say that the unit depends on the function that you are pursuing, but it's another thing to say that we don't select a unit in any situation because there are too many possible units that are relevant. I think those are two very different statements, and I would agree with the first one, but not the second.
Oh, I think we should get back to Nóra, but I'm just going to say that I disagree with the first one as well, which is that a problem situation is not the object. So you might think of framed painting as an object that's discrete. That's not a problem situation. If my problem situation is to ask questions about, for example, the use of light in paintings, across paintings, I might just be using one thing, one part of a painting, not the whole painting. I might be using some part of it, you know. It's not discretely locked into that unit. I may talk about the whole oeuvre of a painter or something like that, or of a workshop or something like that, at which point we're going well beyond the painting. So I'm not talking about the object itself, I'm talking about the problem situation, which is the object and the question combined. But we can talk about this another time. I'm aware of the time. And poor Nóra, keep going, Nóra.
But get back to the question, I'm sorry. It also happens, I mean, in another course, in advanced writing courses, we do theme progression, for example, analysis with the students. And what I feel is that doing like theme new analysis or doing periodicity or whatever analysis we are doing, it's or grammatical metaphors we look at. I couldn't do that combined with LCT semantics, for example, because they are already confused by theme progression analysis, for example. So that would be hard. And another thing I noticed is that sometimes I'm analyzing the semantic gravity and then on the clause level, and then there's one pronoun that changes everything in a different sentence, and then you need to do something with that. So it's a really tricky. I understand what you mean by the unit of analysis being really tricky. About the painting, what I always ask, like what the frame looks like. Is it part of the painting? Where is it put in the museum? Gombrich wrote a really good essay about the importance of frames, and I think frames are super important. But going back to semantic waves, now you can visualize critical reflection on paper, but you can also integrate it into dialogues, and as a tool for students. And it just simply gives guidance, more guidance to me, because students are more visual now, you know that more than me, I think. And the last one is a very simple strategy. My queen sentence, the queen of sentences and ideas, is the guidance through interaction in the context of shared experience. It's like my credo. I don't know, I adapted it. So we need to work with experiences, activate past experiences, create new ones. It's not only the museum. You could go anywhere. You could go to the local market, visit a library, listen to a concert together, but just have some kind of shared experience as your the basis for your collaborative reflection. And we need explicit instructions, and we need to engage with experiences in dialogues before I think we assign writing or research tasks. So some lessons here is that we need to build genre awareness in every assignment. I think we explicitly need to tell students what's expected from them and what the role they do have and how to do it. Semantic waves will help students, but with little terminology to see how they move between different ways of knowing and knowledge. As I said, my chef allegory or simile is like discuss why it is necessary to integrate theoretical approaches. And with painters, it's the same. I used to work a lot with painter teachers, and they struggle with the same thing, like, why do I need to study the technique? Well, and then as a final task, I think it's important to give them the own choice. Sometimes, not always. So research with the course design, again, I think it's the same, like with not chopping up the text to like genre stages and then thinking that will be a unit of analysis for the semantic wave analysis. It's the same with course design. And I thank Lucy for that comment about like how the guidance will change the task. Text analysis and then the translation device. I recently just wrote a paper for a department journal about quality control with the translation device in LCT. And actually my colleagues love the idea, like how we use that, because it really ensures quality control, I think, and understandability and accessibility in terms of research. So that's what I learned. And if you have any questions or comments, I'm more than happy to listen and talk more. And I always start my multimodal text analysis lessons with the unit of analysis, actually, in a picture book.
The first thing I was thinking of was that it always makes me feel really terrible about the fact that I do not a proper critical reflection thing, but we have this, it's called a critical reflection thing that I've kind of had to bring in because tutes are now too big to do any kind of participatory mark on. So we used to have, we're not allowed to only have 2 assessments per term, per semester. We're not allowed. So we have to have 3, which usually means something in the middle and something at the end, and then something that's all the way through. And, you know, people are looking into things like, people are doing things like quizzes and so on and so on. But one of the ways that we've been kind of shifting away from trying to do some sort of participatory mark with too many students, like 35 in a tute, which is not a tute so much as a rugby scrum or something. That's actually more than a game of rugby. Is to do these sort of discussion posts every week based upon readings, and really don't give enough. I really don't give enough guidance to that, because students always end up. There's always some students, even though they can see everyone else's discussion post, so they're all available within the tute. And so they can learn from, to some extent, from other models, but there's always some who do that kind of like, I really like this text by, you know, well, it wouldn't be Bourdieu. They'd never say, I really like this text by Bourdieu, but saying to somebody else, I really like this text by Smith. It made me think about things differently, and it made me think about my life. And it's helped me to think about things, and it's like that kind of stuff, you know, like I really like it. It's made me think about things. It's really important, and there's no sort of real kind of critical reflection on anything. Now, I do try to say to them early on in the semester, you're going to get marked higher if you go out of the context. So if you go up and down, I do a little bit of talk about semantic waves. And I just say, get out, compare it to something else, you know, something else you've learned in the unit, something else you've learned in another unit, a personal experience, something you've learned already somewhere else, somewhere you've seen, give an example in the news, anything to get out of the context of the text you've just written and go up and down in some way, shape, or form. But there's still some who, and maybe it's just inevitable, unless I was, which I don't have the workload to do, I was able to contact those who screw it up and say, look, you know, do this instead. But there's always some. Do you still find that even when you've worked on this, or is this working on this with the students? How many students do you have, Nóra?
5 to 16.
16, and you can do this with the whole lot in classes.
Yeah.
And does that sort of manage to gather up the ones who and push forward the ones who are still locked in that kind of Noah code reflectivity?
Recently, I do this, like I give them a long text, like translating text for museums or inclusive text for museums. And this kind of easy to understand communication now we are looking into, and then say to them, okay, you read this text, we go to the exhibition, you looked at the texts, you read this analytical text written by whoever, and then you find key points and use them to reflect on what you saw in the exhibition. So I give them I'm very strict now.
Yeah,
a lot of people don't agree. Yes, a lot more guidance, because otherwise they don't read anything. Or I just say sometimes to them, like, they just don't read, you know. Or I say to them, like, collect 5 important things in terms of the semiotics of an exhibition space or the text complexity for neurodivergent people, what you learned. And then you collect those 5 things and you share. But I'm strict. A lot of people say, I mean, I didn't used to read like this. I mean, we read Barthes for a full term and it was free discussion. Or we did a lot of literary theory like that, what you like, just let's talk and make connections. I can't do that anymore. Otherwise, they don't read it. Or they tell me they use ChatGPT to write the summary and they don't read it if I don't give them the guidance and the instructions. I don't know what you see. Do students read?
I'm sure they can. Some of them.
Exactly, like, so with that,
it's quite limited.
Yeah. But I overguide them probably. But at least they get the key points now, and they were able to analyze text this way. And we managed to, like, recently translate the text like that, or they managed to analyze what happens in a poster, political posters or whatever. Otherwise, it's like
But it also helps them, doesn't it, Nóra? It helps them to be able to write the next assignment.
Yes. And I don't care if it's more like a kind of sample template kind of thinking at first, because then when they get to the thesis, they can use this kind of waving to write a proper research project and do something more real. So with the small tasks, I think it's good to be a bit protective and to give that to them and then put it in a wave. Sometimes I gave them Esther's one of her Nordic manifesto analysis texts, and they couldn't understand it. You know what I did? Make a visual map, like create a mind map based on the big research paper and highlight the big arguments. And then sometimes they had to even put them on a bigger wave. That was just one time, and then they overloaded with that. So I stay with the visual map, and that helped again. So you need to visualize understanding and analysis somehow, and that might help. It's the same with teaching the golden ratio when I work with painters. Like, when you say that word, it means nothing to them. The best thing to do with technical terms now, and density, ask 5 different people in an art university to talk about colors. That will be an argument. With the semantic and density and gravity, a conservator, a graphic designer, and a painter, and then a sculptor, they will kill each other. What each color means. So there's semantic gravity and density probably for you.